Hey friends, take a moment to settle in. Maybe dim the lights, maybe let your fan hum in the background. Tonight, we're heading somewhere that looks calm only from a distance. The American frontier, the place later branded as the Wild West, though no one living there thought of it as a movie set. They simply called it life. If you enjoy drifting off to slow, quiet history, you can gently tap the like button or subscribe if you want more evenings like this one. And as always, feel free to share in the comments where you're listening from. I'm genuinely curious which state, which city, which country's joining us tonight. Now breathe softly. Let everything slow down, because out there, on those wide plains and dust-cold deserts, nothing moved quickly, except danger. And even воно діяло не героїчно, не красиво, не так, як показують фільми. It crept, it waited, it followed the wind. So, let's begin. Not with gunfights or duels, but with silence. Imagine the world before fences, a horizon without edges, a pale sky fading into lavender as evening settles down. A single cabin, barely holding itself together, standing miles away from the nearest neighbor. A thin line of smoke curling from its chimney, not because someone is cooking a hearty dinner, but because they're trying not to freeze as the sun drops. That's where the real West lived, not in saloons, not on horseback chases. Here, in the fragile space between survival and exhaustion. Families who moved westward often imagined opportunity more than reality. The government posters promised fertile land, open space, fresh starts. But they didn't mention the unpredictable weather that could destroy crops overnight, nor the long stretches of isolation that could bend even the strongest minds. Picture a farmer stepping outside at dusk. His boots sink slightly into the dry soil, cracking it like old paper. He checks the horizon, scanning for anything unusual. Dust rising, a stranger approaching, a storm starting its slow roll across the sky. Evenings were the most dangerous time, not because of outlaws, but because darkness erased distance, and you could no longer tell whether the shape moving toward your land was a friend, a traveler, or someone who preferred you didn't see them at all. Hollywood loves to show pistol duels at noon. Reality staged them in shadows. Inside the cabin, everything smells faintly of wood smoke and iron pots. A woman is pressing bread dough with stiff fingers, not because she has time to bake, but because that bread might be the only meal for 2 days. A child shifts under a patchwork blanket, listening to the wind whistle through gaps between the logs. Even in summer, nights could feel colder than expected. The frontier wasn't kind. It didn't adjust to your needs. And if you wonder why people stayed, the answer is simple. Many had nothing to return to. The West was difficult, but it was theirs. Let's slow down even more. Feel how the air would have settled. No hum of electricity, no passing cars, no distant city noise. Just the crackle of the fire, the low groan of the walls, and somewhere outside, coyotes calling to each other across miles of empty land. Some settlers said those sounds were comforting. Others said they never slept deeply again after hearing them. Myth tells us cowboys were fearless. History tells us they were tired. Most weren't gunslingers or gamblers. They were ranch hands paid poorly, sleeping under the open sky with only their saddle as a pillow. Their days blended into long roads, dust storms, aching muscles, and a constant awareness that one misstep, one rattlesnake, one busted horse, one wrong turn could be the end. Evening was the only time they allowed themselves a moment of stillness. A tin cup of coffee, too bitter and too weak to taste. Boots near the fire. Staring at the stars the way sailors stare at the ocean, because that's all there was. The West wasn't heroic, it was quiet, dangerously quiet, and maybe that's why stories grew around it like vines. When a world is this silent, imagination fills the gaps. People told tales to stay awake, to stay alert, to convince themselves they understood the land they lived on. But deep down, everyone knew the frontier belonged to nature long before it belonged to them. We'll come back to that land again in the next part, through buffalo trails, outlaw hideouts, freezing nights, traveling saloons, and the strange little details no one ever puts into movies. But for now, let the fire dim, let the cabin settle, let the wind drift, let your breath slow. Settle in again, friend. Let the world around you soften just a little more. Tonight, we walk slowly, the way the frontier made everyone walk, not out of calmness, but out of caution. Imagine the early morning after the night we left behind. The sky is the pale color of old parchment, stretched thin across the horizon. There is no alarm clock, no rooster, no peaceful morning ritual. You wake because the cold nudges you, because the fire died long before dawn, because something outside made the cabin walls give a small wooden sigh. Most settlers slept in layers if they slept at all. Thin blankets, worn clothes, a hat if the night was ruthless. Even inside, frost sometimes formed along the inner beams, delicate and uncanny, like winter leaving its handwriting on the walls. As the first light spreads, a farmer pushes the door open. Everything crunches under his boots. The ground feels stiff. And the cold air bites his lungs sharp enough to remind him he's still alive. People often imagine the Wild West as scorching hot, nothing but sun-drenched plains. But mornings could be brutal. The Great Plains, the rocky foothills, the high deserts, they turned cold quickly, mercilessly, unexpectedly. Some journals from the 1870s mention water freezing in buckets left too close to the door and ink turning sluggish in pens. This wasn't a land of comfort. It was a land that demanded respect. He steps away from the cabin now, scanning the ground for tracks, not human ones, though those mattered too, but animal prints, buffalo, deer, elk, or something less convenient. Wolves followed settlers silently, drawn not to people, but to livestock, scraps, or weakness, a sick horse, a calf lost overnight. Anything fragile. Most mornings began with a quick inventory of what survived the night. Behind the cabin, the woman we saw earlier walks out slowly, pulling her shawl tight. The wind tugs at the corners of it. She sets a metal pot down outside, the kind blackened from years of fire smoke, and begins the routine of gathering water from a barrel, but the surface is frozen over. She cracks it with the back of a wooden spoon, breaking the ice like brittle glass. Everything in the West took longer than expected. Cooking, cleaning, repairs, gathering wood. Nothing happened quickly. Even life itself didn't hurry. Inside the cabin, the child wakes to the sound of distant hoofbeats. Not close enough to fear, not far enough to ignore. Travelers pass through often, traders, riders, soldiers, wanderers, preachers. Some were harmless, some were desperate. Some carried news, some carried trouble. The problem was that everyone looked nearly the same from afar. Hat, horse, dust on their boots. By the time a stranger was close enough to identify, they were also close enough to cause trouble if they wanted to. The myth of the West portrays strangers as allies or enemies. Bold, dramatic, clear-cut. Reality didn't offer such sharp lines. Most people were simply tired and trying to survive. Suspicion wasn't hostility, it was insurance. Now imagine following one of those riders, a lone cowboy traveling before sunrise. His horse exhales steam, tiny ghosts disappearing into the cold air. A canteen clinks against his saddle, leather creaks in a slow rhythmic pattern. He hasn't slept well, not for weeks. Not because of outlaws, but because the land itself keeps him on edge. Cowboys spent most nights under the open sky. Some slept wrapped in blankets on top of their saddles. Some used their coats as pillows. A few even tied themselves lightly to their horses so they wouldn't roll downhill during the night. Rain was the worst. Cold, unrelenting, and impossible to escape. More cowboys died of exposure than bullets, but he keeps moving because cattle don't wait, because the pay is small and only comes when the work is done, because drifting becomes a habit before you even realize it. By mid-morning, the sun has softened the frost. The cowboy pitches a small camp near a cluster of low shrubs. He prepares a cup of something he calls coffee, though it tastes more like very old water politely pretending to be coffee. Still, that warm tin cup is the only luxury he'll get today. He looks toward the hills. No towns, no fences, just land stretching endlessly as if the sky forgot to set boundaries. This is the moment that shaped most frontier stories. Not gunfights, not battles, not chases, but long stretches of silence where your mind drifted into strange places because there was nothing else to hold on to. Settlers, cowboys, travelers, all of them learned the same truth. The West was enormous, and they were very small. Maybe that's why the land felt both terrifying and beautiful. You could lose everything here, your way, your livestock, your courage, your life. But you could also find a kind of peace that didn't exist anywhere else. A peace built from distance, from the sound of wind moving through dry grass, from knowing your little cabin or your lonely campfire was a tiny point of light in a world too wide to tame. Let that image settle. The cowboy sipping weak coffee, the woman breaking ice in a barrel, the farmer scanning the horizon. 3 small stories drifting in the same quiet morning. We'll follow them further soon, deeper into the routines, the hardships, the small victories and quiet fears that shaped real frontier life. For now, breathe slowly. Let the prairie widen in your mind. Let the day stretch in warm, gentle silence. Let's drift back into that quiet world, a world where every sound mattered, every shadow stretched farther than it should, and every mile of dirt road carried stories no one ever wrote down. By midday, the frontier warms just enough to fool you. The sun climbs above the plains, soft but steady, and the air finally stops biting at your fingertips. This is the kind of warmth that tricks newcomers into believing the West is gentle. But people who lived here long enough understood something important. If the land feels calm, it's probably saving its strength. Imagine a wagon road, not the wide, tidy kind in movies, but a narrow track carved through dry grass by countless wheels. The path dips and rises gently, following the contours of the land like a slow, wandering stream. A single wagon rattles along it now, its wheels groaning against the weight of everything a family owns. A man walks beside the oxen, tapping them lightly with a worn stick. A woman sits on the wagon seat, her hands resting in her lap, wrapped in fingerless gloves. 2 children peek out from under the canvas cover, the sunlight catching dust motes like tiny drifting stars. Travel days were long, 12, sometimes 14 hours. Not because people were in a hurry, but because stopping early meant risking nightfall in the open. And night on the frontier wasn't something you faced unprepared. The family pauses near a patch of trees, the only shade they've seen since morning. The man removes his hat, wipes his forehead, and listens, always listening. The wind shivers through the leaves, carrying faraway sounds, creaking branches, birds settling, the distant rumble of hooves. You rarely saw danger first. You heard it, or you felt it. The woman glances at the horizon, her eyes narrowed. She has traveled enough roads to know what to fear. Not bandits, not warriors, not even wild animals, but loneliness, distance, accidents, a broken wheel, a sick ox, a sudden storm. These were the true villains of the West. Let's step away from the wagon now, drifting toward a different scene, a small frontier settlement that barely qualifies as a town. Just a scattering of wooden buildings, a general store, a livery stable, a half-finished saloon, and a boarding house that smells like boiling cabbage and wet wool. People imagine frontier towns as lively, loud, dangerous. Some were, most weren't. In the early years, they felt more like temporary camps pretending to be communities. The buildings leaned slightly, as if unsure they'd remain standing through winter. Wooden planks creaked under every bootstep. Dust settled on window frames the moment someone wiped it off. Inside the general store, a traveler is negotiating for supplies. The storekeeper, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, counts beans and flour carefully, not because he's stingy, but because every ounce he sells has to survive until the next shipment, which might be weeks away if roads flood or wagons break. A stranger enters. The bell above the door gives a tired little ring. Everyone turns, not suspiciously, just instinctively. Any new face brought curiosity, caution, and possibility all at once. People didn't gossip in the West because they were nosy. They gossiped because information could save your life. Who came through last week? Was anyone seen camping near the river? Has anyone lost livestock? Did someone claim to see smoke near the old ridge? In a place where the nearest sheriff might be 40 miles away, news spread through whispers long before it reached any official record. Step outside again. A horse trots past, its rider leaning slightly forward, scanning the dirt road. Riders often carried messages, land disputes, illnesses, warnings about weather conditions. Not mail, not letters, not greetings. Just the kind of information people needed to avoid disaster. And speaking of disasters, imagine the sky now. A thin line of gray forming in the west, barely noticeable if you aren't paying attention. But settlers paid attention. They recognized the early signs of a prairie storm, the kind that could flatten crops, swallow visibility, and turn a calm afternoon into a wall of rain, wind, and thunder. Frontier storms were not gentle. They were theatrical, overwhelming, and loud enough to make windows tremble. But before the storm hits, everything becomes eerily still. Birds quiet. Grass stops swaying. Even the air feels like it's holding its breath. Some settlers said this silence was the scariest part of living in the West. Not the gunfights, not the outlaws, not the wild animals, but the moments when nature paused, as if deciding what to do next. Let's return to our wagon family. They sense the shift instantly. The father stops walking, squints into the distance, and whispers something to his wife. She nods quickly, pulling the children closer. They start preparing camp faster than usual, gathering wood, tightening ropes, checking wheels. In the frontier, storms were a reminder that survival was a privilege, not a guarantee. As they work, the light changes. The sky turns a muted pewter, the air grows heavy, warm, uneasy. Soon rain will fall, not gently, not politely, but with the fierce energy of a land still untouched, still wild, still unwilling to be controlled. Before the storm breaks, though, let's pause here. Listen to the wind building. Let the horizon darken slowly. Let the land inhale the way it did every time before weather showed its teeth. Settle in again, because storms on the frontier weren't just weather. They were events people remembered for years, sometimes decades, sometimes forever. The air tightens first. It feels thicker, warmer, almost humming. Old settlers used to say the world grew too quiet, as if the land itself stepped back to make room for whatever was coming. Even the oxen pulling the wagon shift nervously, lifting their heads, sensing what the humans can only guess at. The father urges them forward, guiding the wagon toward a shallow depression in the land. Not exactly a valley, but a dip that might offer some shelter. Frontier wisdom was simple. You didn't want to be on open ground when the sky started yelling. The children fall silent. Not out of fear. They grew up with storms. But because the wind tastes metallic now, like something ancient waking up. A single distant rumble travels across the plains, deep, slow, almost polite, but everyone knows it's only the beginning. The mother pulls the canvas cover tighter, tying knots she has practiced countless times. The ropes dig into her fingers. She doesn't mind. She checks again and again. In the West, you learned quickly that checking once was never enough. Now, imagine the sky. Darkness rolls in unevenly, like thick fabric thrown across a lantern. The sun disappears behind a sudden wall of blue-gray cloud. The wind shifts direction, suddenly colder, sharper, faster. Rain comes without warning, not in gentle drops, but in sheets. Heavy, slanted, unstoppable. It hits the wagon roof like 1,000 fingertips drumming at once. The oxen lower their heads, pushing through the storm as if walking underwater. Everything becomes blurred. The horizon fades, color drains from the world until only shapes remain. Inside the wagon, the children cling to each other, watching the canvas shake. Water seeps through tiny old stitches. A drop hits one of them on the nose. He doesn't cry. He just wipes it quietly and buries himself deeper under a blanket that smells faintly of smoke and wool. Outside, the father keeps walking, hand gripping the wagon rail to stay upright. Rain hits his coat so hard it stings. Each step is heavier than the last. His boots sink into muddy patches forming beneath his feet, patches that didn't exist 10 minutes ago. This is the strange magic of the West. Nothing, 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 and then everything all at once. Thunder cracks overhead, a sharp, violent sound that makes the wooden frame of the wagon tremble. The mother flinches, not from fear, but from instinct. She checks the children again, then sits near the opening to watch the father through the curtain of rain. Storms demanded eyes on every direction. Now imagine the world beyond them, miles of openness with nowhere to hide. Other travelers halt their wagons, horses, or carts, trying to make sense of the chaos. A rancher pushes cattle toward a line of rocks, shouting commands the storm swallows whole. Most people survive storms. Many didn't survive what came after. Because rain did not leave neatly. It carved, It swallowed. It flooded creeks fast enough to pull wagons into them. It turned dust roads into dangerous rivers of mud. But this family pushes on. The father, drenched and shivering, finally steers the oxen into a low patch of land shielded by a stand of cottonwood trees. It's not perfect. Nothing in the West was, but it's enough to keep the wind from flipping the wagon. He climbs inside, breathless, wiping water from his face. The mother reaches for his cold hands, trying to warm them. For a moment, no one speaks. They simply listen as the storm lashes against the canvas. Outside, lightning stitches its bright thread across the sky. Inside, the family waits, not scared, just aware. Awareness was survival. Let's step away from the wagon now, letting the storm surround us, but not touch us. Drift across the plains toward a small settlement, the same one we visited earlier, where people are dealing with the storm in their own way. Inside the saloon, lanterns sway with each thunderclap. The bartender wipes a glass that will be dusty again by tomorrow. A few travelers gather, talking quietly about whether the roof will hold. Most storms rattled buildings, but some peeled roofs as easily as a child tears paper. In the boarding house, a woman checks on her chickens because chickens panicked easily and could injure themselves in storms. She mutters soothing words, though no one knows whether chickens appreciate kindness. The truth is, she's calming herself more than them. In the tiny one-room schoolhouse, the teacher moves children away from the windows. Some are frightened. Some are fascinated. One boy counts seconds between lightning and thunder, trying to guess how close the storm is. Another presses his palms to his ears and hums quietly. Storms didn't bring communities together because of fear. They brought them together because everyone felt small. And the West had a way of reminding people of that whenever it wanted. Now, drift back to the wagon family. The storm begins to ease little by little. The thunder grows softer, the rain less aggressive. The mother peeks outside, letting the cool air brush against her face. The father checks for damage, stepping carefully through the mud. They survived one storm. There would be hundreds more, but that was life here. No one called it heroic. No one called it brave. They simply called it Tuesday. As the final drops fall and the sky lightens again, the world feels washed and new, brighter, cleaner, but still wild. Breathe with that moment. The storm is gone, but the land is still watching. Let the world grow quiet again, because when a frontier storm finally exhausts itself, the silence that follows feels almost unreal. Not peaceful, not comforting, just hollow, as if the land emptied out all its noise at once and now needs a moment to remember how sound works. The sky is still a bruised gray, bruised purple in places, but lighter at the edges. Wet grass glitters. Mud glistens like cooling wax. Every color looks sharper than it did before. Storms could be cruel, but they left the world strangely beautiful. The wagon family steps out slowly. The father checks the oxen first, always the animals first. They survived the storm better than he did. Their hides are soaked, their breaths still shaky, but they nuzzle at the wet grass with relief. The mother squeezes water from the edge of the canvas cover. Her shawl is dripping, hair clinging to her cheeks, fingers numb. She smiles at the children as if she isn't freezing, as if her bones aren't rattling from the cold. Parents in the West had a quiet ritual. They pretended everything was fine until it truly was. The children jump over puddles, their boots splashing mud. Storms frightened them, yes, but storms also broke the monotony. Children everywhere find joy in places adults overlook. Far away, thunder mumbles faintly as if retreating into the distance. Let's drift from the family now and follow that sound toward a ranch not far beyond the hills, the kind held together with hope, stubbornness, and just enough timber to pretend it's sturdy. Ranchers knew storms better than anyone. They lived at the mercy of weather. After every heavy rainfall, the first instinct wasn't to breathe with relief, it was to count. Cattle, horses, chickens, broken fences, missing tools, lost feed. Everything mattered because everything cost something. A rancher steps outside, leaning on his porch railing. He's older, shoulders bent from years of predictable labor and unpredictable losses. He listens. He inhales the scent of wet dirt, petrichor, though no one called it that back then. Just the smell of the world starting over. He whistles sharply. 2 dogs sprint from under the house, barking excitedly before darting into the fields to help him check the herd. Dogs on the frontier weren't pets. They were partners, essential, loyal, tireless. Sometimes the only thing that stood between a rancher and a dangerous night. The rancher follows them slowly, boots sinking into soft, watery earth. He murmurs to the cattle, as if reassuring them the sky won't attack again, at least not today. A calf limps toward him, frightened, not injured, just exhausted. He touches its head gently, whispering something that doesn't need to be words, only warmth. While the West looked harsh, people who lived there learned softness too, the kind that doesn't show in history books. That tenderness was survival. A cruel man didn't last long. The land punished pride faster than bullets ever could. Let's drift again, farther south, toward a cattle drive in the aftermath of the storm. The cowboys sit on their saddles like tired silhouettes carved against the horizon. Their hats drip. Their shirts cling to their backs. The storm didn't frighten them. Storms rarely did, but it drained them. One cowboy rubs his hands together to chase away the cold. Another adjusts his saddlebags, checking for water damage. Their boss, a trail captain, with an expression so calm you'd think he'd been carved from the land itself, scans the herd. The cattle are restless, mooing low, stamping the wet soil. Storms scattered them easily. A single lightning strike could send hundreds running in blind panic. The captain lowers his hat and sighs. They lost a few, they always did, but they'll find them. Cowboys had a strange gift for tracking animals through landscapes most people couldn't even navigate sober. Dust, mud, rain, fog, nothing stopped them. They learned the land the way sailors learned the sea, by instinct, by muscle memory, by small signs others would never notice. Now drift further still, toward the tiny settlement we glimpsed earlier. People step outside cautiously, blinking at the light. The storm has left puddles everywhere, reflecting the sky like shallow, muddy mirrors. Children splash them, their laughter echoing between wooden buildings that still creak from the thunder. At the general store, the owner sweeps water from his doorstep. At the schoolhouse, the teacher opens the windows to let in clean air. At the saloon, the bartender fixes the lanterns that nearly fell during the storm. For a moment, the settlement feels strangely unified. Storm survivors sharing an unspoken thought. We made it through this one, and we'll make it through the next. Even the mountains in the distance seem to breathe again, their edges softened by lingering mist. Let's return to the wagon family now. The father has repaired a loose hinge. The mother is preparing a simple meal. Hard biscuits softened in warm water, a bit of salt pork. Maybe a potato or two if they still have some left. It doesn't smell like much, but to them it smells like resilience. They eat slowly, savoring warmth, not taste. The youngest child curls up beside the mother. The older one asks if storms can follow people. She smiles, brushing hair from his forehead. "No," she says softly. "We just happen to live where the sky gets moody." Her answer is gentle, not entirely true, not entirely false. The West did follow people, not the storms, not the dangers, but the unpredictability. Everyone who moved here accepted a bargain they never signed. The land will give you freedom, but it will ask for something in return. Sometimes strength, sometimes comfort, sometimes safety, sometimes someone you love. The family doesn't think about that now. They focus on the small warmth returning to their fingers, the sound of water dripping from the wagon, the quiet breathing of oxen. The storm is gone, but the journey continues. Let your breath slow with theirs. Let the world settle into a softer rhythm. The frontier is wide, and our night is still long. Take a slow breath. Let the storm drift away behind us like a dark curtain closing. Now the land stretches out once more, wide and unsure of itself, as if deciding what shape it wants to take today. After the rain, the frontier looks deceptively peaceful. The air is fresh. The grass glows faintly with leftover moisture. The wagon wheels sink softly into damp soil, leaving tracks that will dry into hard ridges by afternoon. The family resumes their journey, not because they're ready. No one was ever ready after a storm, but because standing still meant falling behind, and falling behind meant hunger. The oxen pull with renewed effort. Their breaths puff into the morning coolness, steady, rhythmic. The father walks alongside, occasionally murmuring encouragement that only they can hear. Animals were workers, yes, but also companions in this lonely world. The mother sits on the wagon seat, now hands resting in her lap. She scans the horizon, her eyes always moving. Out here, you learn to read the land like a second language. A cluster of low shrubs might mean water. A line of dark earth could mean a hidden creek bed. Circling vultures might mean trouble, or simply nature doing what it always does. A distant rider could be help, or danger, or nothing at all. Most of the time, it was nothing at all. The frontier was full of people, but it was also full of distance. The children rest under the canvas cover, trading stories about lightning and puddles and how the thunder sounded like giant footsteps from heaven. Childhood, even here, had a way of turning fear into imagination. As the wagon creaks forward, the road slowly dries. Mud becomes firm again. Wind carries the scent of wet sagebrush. Above, the sky shifts from gray to a calm, tired blue. Let's drift ahead now, to a stretch of road where a lone traveler is making his way in the opposite direction. An older man with a tall hat and a long coat, leading a stubborn mule that seems unimpressed with everything around it. He nods politely as the wagon nears. The father nods back. That's it. That's the whole exchange. In the West, greetings weren't warm or elaborate. They were cautious, careful, efficient. A nod meant, "I see you." A second nod meant, "I mean you no harm." Words were optional. The traveler continues on his way, humming a tune that sounds like it was sung long before he was born. Now drift even farther ahead, toward a tiny outpost miles down the same road. Just a few buildings, a way station for mail riders, a wooden shed for travelers' horses, and a small shack selling nearly everything no one wanted. Old boots, cracked pots, rusted nails, a jar of pickles floating in cloudy brine. A woman sits outside the shack, cleaning a rifle with slow, delicate care. She's not frightened. She simply knows the land. Most people who survived here lived with a steady kind of fearlessness. Not boldness, not bravery, just acceptance. Track a little farther still, into the rolling hills where a group of buffalo grazes. Massive, calm, ancient. Settlers often wrote about them with awe. They moved like shadows across the grass, their size disguised by distance. The thunder of their hooves could shake the ground in a way storms never could. But today, they are still, eating, breathing, existing, in a world that belonged to them long before wagons carved roads through it. The wagon family will likely never get close to a herd like this. Too dangerous. Buffalo weren't aggressive, but they weren't predictable either. And unpredictability was the one thing settlers feared most. Now return to the wagon. The sun climbs higher. The day warms. Dust begins to rise from the drying road, clinging to clothes, settling on eyelashes, creeping into throats. Settlers use scarves to cover their faces, though the fabric never truly kept dust out. It lived everywhere, in food, in blankets, even in dreams. The family pauses for a midday rest. The father checks the wheels again, tightening a bolt. The mother pours a few drops of water into a tin cup for the children. The oxen chew lazily, grateful for a break. Every stop on the frontier carried the same rhythm. Check the animals, check the wheels, check the sky, check each other, then move on. But today feels a little different, not dangerous, just heavy, as if the land is waiting for something. The father senses it first, a subtle chill in the breeze despite the sun, birds flying lower than usual, the way the grass moves in uneven patches, not flowing with the wind, but reacting to something else. He looks toward the hills. Nothing there, not yet. But the West rarely warned you twice. The family finishes their meal. They climb back into their places. The wagon creaks forward. The land grows quieter. Even the wind holds its breath. Ahead, the hills cast long shadows, darker than they should be at this hour. Something waits. Someone waits. Or maybe nothing waits at all. Sometimes the West simply enjoyed reminding people that comfort was temporary. Let your breath slow again. Feel the road stretch ahead, long and uncertain. We'll follow them deeper soon, into strangers, secrets, and the quiet fears that shape the next part of the journey. Let's slip back into that slow frontier rhythm, the wagon creaking, the oxen pulling, the wind brushing quietly across the grass like fingertips smoothing out a wrinkled blanket. The family moves forward, climbing a gentle rise in the land. Hills like these look harmless, almost soft, covered in a mix of pale grasses and scattered wildflowers. But any hill on the frontier has a habit of hiding things, weather, animals, people, even unpleasant surprises. As they reach the top, the father stops walking. His hand lifts, signaling the oxen to pause. The mother leans forward on the wagon seat. The children fall silent. Something shifts in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Movement, far away. Small shapes in the distance, not clouds, not animals, not dust devils wandering across the plains. Riders, a handful of them, too far to recognize. Close enough to unsettle. On the frontier, seeing strangers wasn't unusual, but seeing strangers moving as a group, that always demanded attention. The father squints, judging distance and direction. The riders aren't heading straight toward them, not yet. They're moving parallel to the wagon's path, following the curve of a dry creek bed that snakes across the plains like an old scar. He doesn't know who they are. Cowboys? Maybe. Ranch hands? Possibly. Drifters? Travelers? Scouts? Trouble? Could be. The West didn't hand out labels easily. You learned to wait before naming a thing dangerous. The mother watches him carefully. She trusts his instincts. Everyone traveling west learned that instincts mattered more than strength or good intentions. Instincts kept you alive. The riders continue at a steady pace, never looking directly toward the wagon, or maybe they do, but from this distance no one can tell. The father resumes walking, though his steps are slower now. He keeps one eye on the road, one eye on the strangers. The children whisper, asking who the riders are. The mother answers softly, "People like us, just passing through." It's not a lie. It's also not the full truth. But children didn't need the full truth, not out here. Let's drift ahead of the wagon toward the riders themselves. 6 men on horseback, their faces partly hidden by wide hats, partly by dust. They don't talk much. Their silence doesn't feel threatening, just practiced. The kind of silence that comes from long rides, long days, and longer thoughts. They're not hunting anyone, not escorting cattle, not traveling toward a town. They're simply moving, following a path the land carved for them. One of them glances toward the wagon far behind them. Just one look. Not enough to read, not enough to understand. He tugs the reins lightly, and the horse adjusts direction by a hair. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious, just the kind of course correction made by someone who spent more time in the saddle than indoors. Now drift back to the wagon. The father slows the oxen again. The riders have vanished behind a line of hills, swallowed by the folds of the land the way a stone disappears into tall grass. He doesn't relax, not yet. Out here, danger often came from the things you couldn't see. To ease tension, the mother begins recounting a story. Not a cheerful one, but a familiar one. Frontier families told stories the way sailors told weather lore, not for amusement, for grounding. She tells the children about the first time she traveled west, how she thought the road would be smooth, how she imagined green fields and quiet nights and cities rising magically from the dust. Instead, she found wind that never slept, rivers that flooded without warning, and weeks when the only other human they saw was a lonely man carrying a bag of mail and a broken smile. The children listen, not quite understanding, but enjoying the rhythm of her voice. Then, a new sound. Hoofbeats, soft, distant, but unmistakable. The father turns sharply. Not the 6 riders, someone else. A single horse approaches from the opposite direction, from behind a ridge the family didn't notice earlier. For a moment, everyone freezes. The horse trots slowly, carefully. Its rider sits upright, not slouched, not tense, just aware. A woman. That's the first unexpected detail. Women traveled alone sometimes, but rarely, and rarely without urgency. Her hat is tilted low. Her coat is long and dark, damp from the earlier storm. Saddlebags hang heavy at her sides. A rifle is strapped behind the saddle, clean, well kept, used often. She is not lost. She is not scared. And she is not inexperienced. As she grows closer, the father steps away from the oxen. Keeping his hands visible, frontier etiquette was simple. Show your palms. Show your intentions. The rider slows her horse to a steady walk. "Morning," she says. Her voice is calm, almost soft, but carries authority, the kind earned from miles of hard travel. "Storm treat you fair?" The father nods. "Fair enough." She glances at the children, then at the sky, then back down the road. Not nosy, just calculating daylight. "Creek ahead washed out," she says. "You'll want to cut east before the ridge unless you fancy losing the wheel." She points toward a faint path barely visible through the grass, a safer route no map would ever show. The mother's shoulders ease slightly. This stranger is the good kind. The father nods again, gratitude hidden, but clear. The rider touches her hat and continues on. No names exchanged, no questions asked, no assumptions made. That was the language of the West. And now the wagon family presses forward, following her advice. The new path curves gently, bypassing a hidden danger they would have discovered too late. The land opens wider, the air warms, the long silence returns. But the father still watches the hills, remembering the 6 riders. In the West, 1 stranger could be help. 6 could be a pattern, and patterns mattered. Let your breath settle again. The road ahead is long, and what waits there isn't danger. Not immediately. But something is shifting in the rhythm of the land, something subtle, something human, something coming slowly, like dusk. Let's ease back into the slow sway of the wagon, into the creaking wood, the dry grass brushing the wheels, the soft thump of oxen hooves pressing into damp soil. The storm is gone. The lone rider is gone. But her warning lingers, carried in the father's thoughts like a quiet echo. The family follows the faint side trail she pointed out, a barely visible line through the grass. More suggestion than road. Only someone who lived with the land, listened to it, trusted it, would know it was here at all. The path curves gently eastward. The land dips, rises, breathes. The clouds drift lazily overhead, indifferent to human worries. For a time, everything feels calm. The children play a small game, counting birds perched on fence posts. Though no real fences exist out here, only the broken remains of what someone tried to build long ago. One child laughs every time he miscounts. The mother smiles quietly, glad for the distraction. But the father, he keeps glancing over his shoulder, not nervously, just aware, because the land behind him is too quiet now. And quiet in the West never lasted long unless something forced it. The oxen pull steadily uphill, the wheels groan as the ground becomes firmer. When they reach the ridge, the view spreads like a painted panorama, rolling plains, long shadows, a dry creek bed twisted like a copper wire through the earth, far-off hills rising in gentle waves. And there, half a mile down the original road, something catches his eye, a deep gouge, the earth torn, sunken, broken, exactly where the woman said the washout would be. A wagon crossing there would have snapped an axle, toppled sideways, maybe worse. The father exhales softly, a silent thank you to a nameless rider who asked nothing in return. The mother notices what he's looking at. Their eyes meet, no words needed. The West relied heavily on people who appeared suddenly, offered help, and vanished again, like ghosts made of flesh and dust. Let's drift away once more, down the ridge and across the plains. Toward the settlement we keep circling like a distant star. Something new is stirring there. A traveling preacher arrives, one of those thin, sunburned men who carried little except a Bible, a coat, and 6 decades of stories etched into the wrinkles around his eyes. His horse is old but determined. His voice is calm but steady. And his presence always drew attention because preachers brought news from far beyond the horizon. He pauses at the saloon first, not to drink, but to ask if anyone has seen a missing rider. A woman, traveling alone, tall hat, dark coat, a rifle strapped to her saddle. The bartender's eyebrow lifts. He's heard of her, a quiet protector of sorts. Not hired, not official, just someone who kept the peace when the nearest lawman was too far to matter. The preacher's tone is different, more anxious. He isn't looking for help. He's looking for someone he fears might be walking into danger. Let's leave that behind for now. We'll return to it. For the moment, drift back to the family. They continue across the high ridge, the wagon wobbling slightly on the uneven rocks. The children peek out, excited to see the world from above. The mother grips the seat tightly, her knuckles pale. On the frontier, high places gave you perspective, but they also made you visible. The father knows this. He doesn't like it, but there is no other way forward. Wind sweeps across the ridge, cool and insistent. The wagon tilts gently. The oxen snort, press on, pause. Press on again. At the top, the land opens into a shallow bowl of grass and wild sage. A good place to rest. A better place to hide from anything watching on the open road. The father guides the wagon down the slope, moving carefully. The wheels leave long grooves. Small stones shift beneath their weight. When they reach the bottom, he stops to breathe, hands resting on his knees. He isn't tired, not exactly, just weighed down by something he can't name. The mother senses it. "What is it?" she asks quietly. "Riders," he says. "6, moving north." She doesn't ask if he thinks they're dangerous. She knows the answer is never simple. Instead, she asks, "Should we hurry?" He looks at the sky. No storm, no danger, plenty of daylight. "We won't outrun anyone," he finally says. "We stay steady." The land's on our side for now. And he believes it, at least partly. The children nap in the wagon as it begins moving again, lulled by the gentle rocking. The mother hums a tune from her childhood, a soft melody meant to calm horses, babies, and sometimes adults. The father keeps walking, boots striking the earth in a slow, repetitive rhythm. Hours pass this way, slow, steady, quiet. Then the oxen stop. Not because the father pulled the reins, not because the wagon is stuck, but because something ahead makes them hesitate. Animals on the frontier sensed things long before humans did. The father steps forward, shading his eyes. And there, lying near a patch of tall grass, he sees it. A broken horseshoe. Fresh, bent out of shape, dropped recently. He kneels, turning it in his hand, feeling the cold metal. It's not a threat, not a sign of danger, but a sign of someone close, someone traveling fast, someone pushing their horse harder than most would dare after a storm. The mother leans forward. "Is it her?" she asks softly. "No," he says. "Someone else." He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. In the West, clues didn't fall from the sky. They appeared in the dirt, quiet, unassuming, important. He pockets the horseshoe without thinking, a habit, a keepsake, a precaution. The family moves on. The air grows warmer. The shadows stretch longer. The land hums with a strange, expectant stillness. Something's coming, not doom, not disaster, just a shift, a change in rhythm. The West always warned you before it introduced something new, a little at a time. A sign here, a rider there, a horseshoe in the grass. Let your breath fall into that same rhythm. Slow, steady, waiting. Let the world soften again. Let the wheels roll slowly. Let every sound stretch out long enough to settle in the chest rather than the ears. The wagon keeps moving through the wide, shallow basin, and something about the air feels different now. Not dangerous, not comforting, just aware, as if the land has noticed the family and is quietly deciding what to do with them. The oxen pick up their pace without being asked. Animals always feel things first. The broken horseshoe in the father's pocket grows warm from his body heat. He keeps touching it without realizing, thumb brushing the bent metal, mind wandering in circles. Whoever left this wasn't taking their time, he murmurs, half to himself. The mother hears, but doesn't respond. She watches the horizon, scanning for shapes, movement, shadows. Her eyes are sharp, but the land is sharper, giving glimpses of truth the way the sky gives glimpses of starlight before truly getting dark. The children sleep again, their small breaths rising and falling beneath the canvas. The rocking of the wagon is their lullaby. The West, for all its cruelty, always had a way of lulling children into deep, dreamless sleep. Hours pass, slow, steady hours, the kind that stretch time thin until even the horizon feels like it's holding its breath. Then something breaks it, a sound, faint, distant, metallic. Not thunder, not hooves, not a wagon, a hammer, a blacksmith's hammer. Clang, clang, clang. It comes from somewhere past the next rise, rhythmic, steady, unmistakably human. The father stops walking. The mother straightens on the wagon seat. The oxen pause, listening. Blacksmiths rarely worked alone and never worked in the middle of nowhere. Maybe a camp, the mother suggests. Maybe, the father replies, but neither fully believes it. The sound grows louder as they continue. Clang, 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 until at the crest of a small hill, the family sees something unexpected, a forge, a real one, right there, out in the open. Not part of a town, not part of a ranch, just a small setup beneath a canvas lean-to, a portable anvil, a coal bed still glowing, a man working metal with practiced strength, and beside him, 2 horses, both saddled, both restless, both carrying dust from long travel. The blacksmith looks up when the wagon approaches. He wipes his forehead with a cloth, leaving a faint streak of soot. His face is worn but not unfriendly, the kind you could trust if you needed to, or fear if you had to. "Afternoon," he calls out, voice roughened by smoke and heat. His hammer rests gently against the anvil, as if tired too. The father nods, keeping his distance. "Afternoon." The mother offers a polite smile. The children peek out, fascinated by the glowing forge. The blacksmith gestures toward them with his chin. "Storm do you wrong?" "Not too bad," the father says. "Good. Saw the creek wash out this morning. Lucky you didn't take the main road." They exchange a quiet glance. Another confirmation that the lone woman's warning saved them. The blacksmith returns to his work, shaping a horseshoe glowing red at the edges. Clang, clang. "You traveling far?" he asks without looking up. "A few more days," the father replies. "That's so. Might want to stick to this side of the basin. Riders came through earlier, 6 of them, moving fast, didn't stop to talk." The hammer pauses mid-air. That silence is louder than any impact. The father stiffens. The mother's fingers curl around the edge of the wagon seat. The blacksmith doesn't push, doesn't pry, just lets the information hang between them like smoke. He sets the shoe aside, dips it in water, steam rising in a thick white puff. "You need a wheel checked? Oxen shoed? Anything mended?" he asks finally, tone softer, more grounded. The father hesitates, then brings the wagon forward. The blacksmith examines the wheels, runs his hand along the axles, checks bolts, taps a spoke with his hammer. His movements are deliberate, almost gentle, a craftsman's touch, not a traveler's. "Good work on this wagon," he says finally. "Old, but sturdy. You'll make it." The father nods again, gratitude hidden beneath politeness. The blacksmith returns to his anvil. Clang, clang. "You folks keep to the low ridges tonight," he adds. "Wind's shifting. Might get cold." It's advice, not a warning. But in the West, the difference between advice and warning was often emotional, not logical. The family continues down the path, leaving the hammer's steady rhythm behind. The children talk excitedly about the forge, the glowing metal, the steam. The mother stays quiet. The father, even quieter. Because the blacksmith said nothing about the woman rider, not a word. If he saw her, he didn't mention it. If he didn't see her, the father isn't sure which option worries him more. As the sun begins to lower, casting long golden rays across the grass, the air grows cooler. Birds settle on fence posts that don't exist. The wind picks up, brushing across the land like a warning wrapped in gentleness. The father slows the oxen again. Something in him grows unsettled. Not fear, not suspicion. Just an instinct that the land is shifting again, making room for something unexpected. He glances at the sky. The mother glances at him. They don't speak. They don't need to. The West is speaking now, quietly, subtly, through broken horseshoes, through silent riders, through blacksmiths working alone where no blacksmith should be. The day is ending, and the next part of their journey will not be as calm. Let your breath soften. The grass bends gently. The sky deepens. Night begins to creep in. The sun sinks low, turning the sky into a long stretch of amber and violet. Shadows gather slowly at first, then all at once. The way darkness arrives on the frontier, decisive and unbothered by human schedules. The father guides the wagon toward a cluster of bent cottonwood trees. A good place to stop. Protected, but not too hidden. Frontier travelers never hid completely. That invited curiosity. The oxen slow, grateful. Their breaths puff into the cooling air. The children stir awake, rubbing their eyes. Voices, soft with sleep. The mother climbs down, stretching her stiff legs, shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. She glances at the sky, the kind of practiced glance that tells her everything she needs to know about the coming night. Clear, cold, quiet. The father secures the wagon, checks the oxen, and gathers dry wood from the base of the cottonwoods. Storms leave the ground wet, but the trees always hide a few patches of dryness inside their twisted roots. A tiny fire crackles to life, small, controlled, just enough to cook by, not enough to attract unwanted attention. The children huddle close, warming their hands. Their laughter returns, the soft, tired kind that comes at the end of a long day. But beneath that small joy, something else lingers, a subtle shift, a tension too faint to speak aloud, because night on the frontier is not night anywhere else. It is enormous, heavy, alive. The plains don't fall silent. They deepen. Every sound becomes sharper, more important. A distant howl doesn't just echo, it vibrates. The mother cooks a simple meal, beans, a bit of dried meat, warm bread softened with leftover storm water. It smells like comfort, even if it tastes like survival. The father doesn't sit right away. He stands at the edge of the firelight, turning slowly, scanning the horizon. "Do you see something?" the mother asks quietly. "No," he says, but the word "yet" lingers unsaid. Let's drift outward now, slipping away from the little camp and across the darkening plains. Farther south, the settlement settles too. Lanterns glow in windows. The preacher who arrived earlier sits at a table, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. He traces the rim with one finger, thoughtful, troubled. He hasn't found the woman he's searching for. And the riders he heard about, the 6, unsettle him more. He whispers a prayer, not dramatic, not desperate, just a tired conversation with a God who has watched over too many lost travelers. Drift further north now, to the blacksmith we left behind. His forge is dim. The fire crackles low. The horses eat quietly nearby. He isn't working anymore. He just sits on a wooden stool staring into the fading coals. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out something small, a silver button, worn, flattened slightly as if stepped on. He rolls it between his fingers, not thoughtfully, not sentimentally, but with the expression of a man who knows exactly what it means and wishes he didn't. Then he pockets it again, stands slowly, and checks the saddles on the 2 horses. He's not done traveling tonight. Now drift farther still, toward the 6 riders. They're camped far from the family, miles away across the plains, but they aren't resting. They aren't cooking. They aren't speaking. They wait. Their horses shift restlessly. The men sit in a semicircle, watching the land in silence, as if expecting someone or something to appear. Their faces are unreadable in the dim glow of a small lantern, but their eyes hold the same expression: focus, purpose, anticipation, whatever they want. It isn't the Wagon family, not yet, maybe not ever, but their presence threads through the night like a quiet tension. Now drift back to the little camp beneath the cottonwoods. The fire crackles softly. The children fall asleep wrapped in blankets. The mother whispers a story about stars, how ancient travelers used them like maps, how the sky was the only book people could read without learning how to read at all. The father listens while tending the fire, adding a few sticks at a time. He isn't afraid, but he isn't relaxed. He pulls the broken horseshoe from his pocket, turns it in his hand, feels the weight of it, heavier now somehow, as if tied to something he can't see. "Do you think someone's following us?" the mother asks, finally, voice low. He shakes his head. "No, I think someone's following someone else." She swallows. "Should we be worried?" "Not yet," he says, which is frontier language for yes, but not for the reasons you think. The fire dims, the night thickens. Coyotes call to each other in a sad, mourning way that always makes the plains feel lonelier. Then a sound, not loud, not sharp, just enough to freeze the father's hand where it rests near the fire. A twig, snapped, not by wind, not by animal weight, but by a deliberate step. The father rises slowly, carefully, eyes adjusting to the darkness beyond the firelight. The mother straightens, instinctively pulling the children closer, even in their sleep. Another step, soft, measured. "Who's there?" the father calls out, calm, steady, not revealing the rising tension in his voice. Silence. Then a figure emerges from the shadows, tall, coat dark, hat low, a rifle strapped across her back. The woman rider. Her horse stands behind her, half hidden in the dark. She doesn't step forward into the firelight. She stays at its edge, where faces blur and shadows protect. "You should move before morning," she says. No greeting, no explanation, just those words. The mother stiffens. The father steps closer, though still cautious. "Why?" he asks. The woman raises her head slightly, just enough for the fire to catch the edge of her face. "Because," she says softly, "you're not the only ones who took the side trail." Her voice carries the finality of someone who has seen far more than she ever wanted. She turns, mounts her horse, and disappears into the night. The father stands frozen for a moment, hearing the echo of her warning. The mother's breath catches. The children stir restlessly in their sleep. The fire pops softly, and the night grows deeper. Let your breath slow. Feel the quiet settle, heavy but not harsh. The story isn't racing. It's unfolding piece by piece, shadow by shadow. The night holds its stillness for a long, trembling moment after the woman rider disappears. The father listens to the fading rhythm of her horse's hooves until they dissolve into the dark. The mother exhales slowly, as if she's been holding her breath since the moment the stranger appeared. But sleep doesn't come easily on nights like this. The fire burns low. Shadows sway gently across the grass. The cottonwoods whisper in the wind, their leaves rustling like quiet warnings. The father stays awake long after the others settle. He sits with his back to the wagon wheel, scanning the distance, the horizon, the bushes, the darkness. His senses sharpen the way they do when the land demands vigilance. No sounds come except the occasional crackling of the dying fire and distant coyotes singing their restless song. But something in the night feels crowded. Not with people, not with danger, with the weight of what's moving across the plains unseen. Just before dawn, the father's eyes finally grow heavy. Sleep brushes him lightly, the kind of sleep that never truly settles, the kind you wake from if a leaf falls the wrong way. When morning arrives, it doesn't arrive gently. The children wake first, shivering under blankets, surprised by how cold the world has become. Night stole away the warmth of day and replaced it with a crisp, biting chill. Frost coats the wagon wheels and sparkles across the grass like pale glass dust. The mother rubs her arms, breath visible in thin white clouds. The father stands immediately, alert, scanning their surroundings before he even stretches. He walks toward the tree line and freezes. Footprints, not theirs, not animals, human, fresh. A set of boots had circled the camp sometime during the night, not the woman's. These prints are heavier, wider, deeper, a man's, maybe more than one. The father crouches, running a finger along the edges. The frost broke under their weight only hours ago. The mother joins him, covering her mouth. "Did she come twice?" she whispers. "No," he says softly. "These aren't hers." The realization sinks heavy between them. Someone was watching, close, quiet, unnoticed. Whether they meant harm or simply curiosity is unclear. But on the frontier, intentions mattered less than presence. The father stands, brushing frost from his fingers. "We move," he says. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't show fear. The West respects people who stay calm. The family packs quickly. The mother extinguishes the fire, burying its embers in cold dirt. The children climb into the wagon without complaint. instinctively sensing the urgency their parents aren't explaining aloud. As the wagon begins rolling again, the oxen snort clouds of warm breath into the cold air, their hooves crunching frost with each step. The father keeps glancing behind them, not obsessively, just responsibly. They take the same side trail, the one the woman rider pointed out, the one the blacksmith confirmed was safer than the main road. But now the trail feels narrower, more enclosed. The grass leans a little too still. The land waits too quietly. A few miles down the path, the family halts again. Another set of tracks. More footprints, heading the same direction they are. The father kneels, examining the impressions carefully. 3 men, maybe 4, traveling light, moving quickly, not wandering, following. But following who? He stands quietly, thinking. The mother watches him, waiting for his judgment. Finally, he says, "They're not after us." She nods slowly. "But they're close." "Close isn't always danger," he reminds her. But the doubt in his voice betrays how thin that reassurance is. The children whisper from inside the wagon, asking why they stopped. The mother gives a soft smile, telling them they're just checking the wheels. A small, harmless lie. The kind parents tell to keep innocence intact a little longer. The journey continues. The trail curves into a stretch of prairie dotted with shrubs and sage. Frost melts into glimmering droplets. Birds lift from bushes in startling bursts of wings. The world feels almost normal again. But the father keeps noticing signs. A twig broken in a way nature wouldn't break it. Grass pressed down in long, narrow lines. The faint smell of horse sweat drifting on the wind. Someone is ahead of them. Someone is pushing hard. As the sun climbs, warming the plains, the mother finally breaks the silence. "Do you think she's tracking them?" The father doesn't answer right away. He scans the horizon again, the far ridge where the land folds into shadow. "I think," he says slowly, "she's tracking something." He pauses. "And they're tracking her." The mother's breath catches. "That's why she came last night." "Yeah," he whispers, "that's why." The family falls quiet again, because the frontier rarely gave warnings, but when it did, they never came without reason. Let's drift ahead now, following the faint thread of footprints and hoof marks cutting through the grass. Miles ahead, hidden from the family by a rise in the land, the 6 riders appear briefly. They move in a line this time, tighter, more deliberate. One of them dismounts, crouching beside a patch of disturbed soil. He brushes his fingers along the tracks the woman rider left hours earlier. His face doesn't reveal anything. He simply stands, mounts his horse again, and gestures toward the east. They change direction, all 6. Quiet, precise, confident, not hunting blindly, not wandering, not guessing, tracking, now drift back to the blacksmith. He rides alone, but at a measured pace, not racing, not chasing. His horse moves with careful focus as if taught to read the land just as well as he does. In his pocket, the silver button rests, a clue, a warning, a memory. And in the far south, the preacher mounts his old horse too. He mutters to himself, not prayers this time, but regrets. He knows the pattern forming on the frontier. He hopes he's wrong. He rarely is. Let's return to the family one last time before we pause. The road is open now, wide, bright. The frost has melted into morning dew, but the father's posture has changed. He walks closer to the wagon. He listens more carefully. He glances at the hills more often, because the frontier just became smaller, tighter, more tangled. And though the family is not the reason for that, they are now caught between forces moving quietly through the land. Follow your breath. Slow, steady. Feel the road stretching ahead. Feel the tension deepening, not harshly but naturally, the way dusk deepens into night. What comes next does not arrive loudly. It arrives with a whisper. The morning brightens, but the land feels dimmer somehow, as if the sun is shining through a thin veil of something unspoken. The wagon rolls forward, its wheels leaving damp trails through the soft earth. And though the world looks open and harmless, every instinct the father has learned over years of travel whispers otherwise. Nothing looks wrong, but nothing feels right. The oxen plod steadily, heads low, their breaths no longer steaming in the warming air. The mother watches the sky, the road, the ridge lines. The children hum a quiet song under the canvas, unaware of the shifting tide around them. But the father, he keeps touching the horseshoe in his pocket as though it has become some strange, unplanned talisman. They reach a place where the land begins to rise gently again, a slope of soft, pale grass leading toward an uneven ridge. The father pauses at the base, studying the ground the way a tracker studies truth. More footprints, older ones. Some deep, some shallow, some from bare hooves, others from shod horses. A busy trail, but not a friendly one. He kneels and brushes aside loose dirt. A small fragment of something glints in the light. Metal? Stone? No, something else. A broken spur, twisted, bent at the edge as if torn during a struggle or a fall. He turns it in his palm, feeling its story without knowing the details. The mother approaches, whispering, "Is it hers?" He shakes his head. No, this wasn't dropped. It was ripped. She looks out across the open land, now vast and unsettlingly empty. Do we keep going? We have to, he says. Stopping would mean waiting for something we don't understand. They move on. The trail winds upward. The wagon groans. The oxen brace their weight, muscles trembling. The mother takes the reins for a moment while the father walks ahead, testing the slope before the wagon follows. The plains stretch in every direction, beautiful and indifferent. The wind sweeps low, bending the grass in waves. No birds sing now. The world has grown too observant. At the top of the ridge, the father stops again, but not because of danger this time, because something unexpected lies ahead. A fire pit, freshly used, still warm. The ashes shift lightly in the breeze, but embers glow beneath the gray surface. Someone camped here within the last hour, maybe less. The children peer out of the wagon, curious. The mother steps forward, worry shadowing her face. "Do you think they saw us?" she whispers. "No," the father answers, not confidently, but honestly. He studies the ground around the camp. 2 horses tied here. One rider sat on this stone, another near that log. Their footprints circle outward, then disappear over the ridge, but something else lies near the ashes, half buried in the dirt. A strip of black cloth, torn, thin, recognizable. The father holds it up. The mother's voice trembles. It's hers. The woman rider's coat, the edge of it ripped clean, maybe during a confrontation, maybe during a fall, maybe during something worse. The father exchanges a quiet look with the mother, the kind that lasts only a second, but holds everything they fear. He tucks the cloth safely into the pocket with the horseshoe. The land ahead dips into a shallow valley dotted with sagebrush and low-growing shrubs. From here, the trail branches in 2 directions. One path leads east toward a river. The other curves north, toward the open plains. The father studies both tracks carefully. The woman's horse took the east path. The 6 riders, the deeper hoof prints, the broken spur. They went north. The father takes a long breath. The mother watches him. "What do we do?" she asks softly. "We stay on her path," he replies. "If trouble's up north, we won't outrun it. East gives us cover, trees, water, land that breaks the wind." "But will she be there?" the mother asks. "I don't know," he admits, "but someone will." They turn east. The landscape changes subtly. The air carries the faint scent of water. Grass grows taller here, thicker. The wind becomes more gentle, more rhythmic. Yet something still feels wrong. Halfway down the slope, the oxen stop again, snorting, pawing at the earth. "Easy," the father murmurs, but their instincts are louder than his reassurance. The mother kneels beside the wagon, whispering, "What do they sense?" Before he can answer, a sound rises on the wind. Not hooves, not voices, not metal. A scream, far off, echoing, faint, but unmistakably human. The mother's hand flies to her mouth. The children stiffen beneath the canvas. The father's entire body goes still, taut as bowstring. The scream fades. Silence returns. A sickening silence that feels heavier than storm clouds. The father looks east, toward where the land dips and curves out of sight. He whispers, "Someone's in trouble." The mother touches his arm. "You're not thinking—" "I am," he replies. "We can't leave someone hurt, not out here." "But the riders," she begins. "I know," he says, "but whoever screamed isn't one of them." And she knows he's right. The scream didn't sound like a hardened man, didn't sound like someone on horseback, didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like someone alone, terrified, calling into a world too big to answer. The father looks at his family. "You stay with the wagon," he tells the mother. "Keep the children hidden. If anything happens, take the east trail and don't look back." Her eyes fill with fear, but also strength. She nods. He takes the rifle from the wagon, loads it carefully, and moves toward the valley where the sound came from. Every step grows quieter, every breath deeper, every instinct sharper. The trail slopes downward, the grass parts under his boots. The world becomes unnervingly still, and then he sees something. A horse, alone, breathing hard, riderless. Its saddle hangs broken, leather torn, dust covers its flank. Its eyes are wide. The father approaches slowly, soothing it with soft words. But before he can check its injuries, he notices something else. On the ground nearby, a long skid mark, a struggle, footprints, a trail of dragged dirt, and something dark. A hat, a familiar one, the woman rider's hat, lying crushed in the grass. The father kneels, lifting it lightly, his stomach sinking with the weight of everything he feared. Something happened here, something violent, something fast. And somewhere nearby, someone screamed. He looks toward the trees, the shadows, the valley ahead, and he whispers, "I'm coming. Let your breath slow. The quiet is deep. The land is waiting, and the story's pulse just changed." The valley swallows sound, not the way forests do gently, or the way canyons do, echoing and repeating. This valley swallows sound like a mouth, closing tightly around whatever enters it. The father steps forward carefully, rifle in hand, the woman rider's crushed hat tucked under his arm. The grass whispers against his boots. The wind holds its breath. Somewhere ahead, hidden between brush and shadow, the trail continues, faint marks in the earth showing where someone was dragged, where a struggle twisted the ground, where panic pressed itself into the soil. The father follows those signs, one slow step at a time. He passes a patch of broken shrubs. He kneels, fingers brushing a snapped branch. The break is fresh, hours old at most. He moves on. A fallen canteen lies half buried in the grass, dented, scratched, still cold to the touch. He keeps going. The trail leads him toward a cluster of tall sagebrush growing thickly at the valley floor. The plants sway with a strange, uneven rhythm, not from wind, but from something moving inside them. The father raises his rifle slightly, not pointing, just prepared. "Hello?" he calls quietly. "Is someone there?" Silence, then a rustle, a gasp, soft, human. He moves forward, spreading the brush aside with one hand. There, lying on the ground, breathing in shallow, painful bursts, is the woman rider. Her coat is torn. Her face is smudged with dirt and blood. Her hat, the one he found, left the imprint of a boot across its brim. She tries to sit up but winces sharply, gripping her side. When she sees him, her hand goes instinctively to where her rifle should be, but it isn't there. The father kneels beside her. "You're hurt," he says softly. "No," she mutters through clenched teeth. "Just losing an argument with the ground." Despite the pain, her voice hasn't lost its dry humor. He checks her quickly. No broken bones, but deep bruising, a gash along her ribs, and a swollen ankle. "What happened?" he asks. She exhales, slow, deliberate, fighting dizziness. "They found me," she says. "Who? The 6 riders?" "No," she whispers. "Worse." Her eyes darken, not with fear, but with fury held tightly under control. The father feels the weight of those words settle heavy in his chest. "What do you mean, worse?" She looks toward the ridge they came from. Men who know the land too well, who don't want witnesses, who don't want anyone interfering with what they're tracking. The father's breath catches. What are they tracking? "Not you," she says. "Not me." A pause. They're tracking someone who doesn't know he's being hunted. Her voice trembles, not from pain, but urgency. She grabs the father's sleeve, pulling him closer. "You have to move your family," she whispers. "Now." Before they loop back, they saw the wagon trail. They'll put things together faster than you think. The father's throat tightens. "Are they coming this way?" She hesitates, and that hesitation says everything. "Yes," she finally whispers. "They will. They always double back." He swallows hard. "We have to get you up," he says. "Can you stand?" "Not quickly," she mutters, "but I can try." He helps her slowly to her feet. She grimaces, leaning heavily against him, but she doesn't complain. Frontier people didn't waste breath on pain. Once upright, she steadies herself on a tree trunk. "My horse? I saw it," he says. "It's alive." Her eyes close with relief. She opens them again, razor sharp, despite everything. "Listen," she says. "What I'm about to tell you, you won't understand all of it. You don't need to. Just know the riders aren't after revenge or robbery. They're after a man who stole something he shouldn't have. Something that belongs to people who don't forgive mistakes." The father's pulse quickens. "Who is he?" She shakes her head. "He's smart enough to hide, stupid enough to think they won't find him, and desperate enough to run in a straight line, which is the worst mistake you can make on the plains." "And you're trying to warn him?" the father asks. "I'm trying to reach him first," she says. She winces again, gripping her ribs. But right now, I need to help you survive. A crack of sound echoes from the ridge, a small sound, soft but unmistakable. A stone kicked loose. The father's blood runs cold. They're close, she says, voice suddenly sharp. He looks toward the ridge, nothing visible, but the land is never empty. He steps forward, rifle ready, scanning the horizon. The woman grabs his sleeve again. No, she whispers. You don't fight them. You hide from them. He turns back. Hide where? In plain sight, she says. Then, help me to my horse. They move quickly, slower than he'd like, faster than her body wants. They reach the horse in minutes. The animal trembles, but it's loyal, lowering its head as she grabs the saddle horn. I can ride, she insists. The father raises an eyebrow. You sure? No, she mutters, but I can stay on. She swings her leg over with difficulty, tightening her jaw against the pain. She looks him in the eye. Take your family east, to the river, stay under the cottonwoods. They won't search the trees, too many shadows, too much noise, and whatever you hear, don't answer it. He stares at her. What will you do? She narrows her eyes toward the ridge. What I'm good at, she says softly, buying time. Before he can argue, she kicks the horse forward. The animal leaps into motion. She disappears into the valley like a streak of determination and dust. The father stands frozen for a moment, the prairie wind cold against his skin. Then he runs, faster than he thought possible, back toward his family. The wagon comes into view, the mother's face pale. The children quiet, watching him with wide, trusting eyes. He reaches them, breathless. We're leaving, he says. Now, no questions. The mother nods instantly. She doesn't need explanations. She trusts the look in his eyes. She gathers the children. He grabs the reins. The oxen lurch forward. Behind them, a distant echo rises on the wind. Hoof beats, many, fast, relentless. The father doesn't look back. Looking back wastes time. The trees ahead, the safety the rider promised, grow closer with every frantic step. The land breathes harder. The wind sharpens. Something dangerous approaches, and the family races toward shelter that may or may not save them. Let your heart slow. Let your breath deepen. The story is tightening, but we remain calm. The oxen move faster than they have all day, as if they too understand that the ground behind them is gathering danger. The father urges them on, but he barely needs to. Animals know. They always know. The mother keeps the children low under the canvas, whispering calm words that don't match the fear tightening her own breath. The wagon rattles violently across uneven earth, dipping into hollows, bouncing over clumps of dried roots. Every jolt feels louder, sharper, too loud for the quiet chase happening behind them. The trees rise ahead, the cottonwoods by the river the rider spoke of, tall, dense, branches twisted together like protective hands. The father glances back once, just once, and what he sees nearly stops his heart. Dark specks cresting the ridge. Not many, 4, 5, it doesn't matter. They're moving fast, the kind of fast that comes with purpose, not wandering, not scouting, pursuing. He snaps the reins again. Hold on, he calls to the mother. The wagon barrels toward the cottonwoods. The grass whips against the wheels. The wind whistles through the wooden frame. The father's feet pound the earth as he runs beside the oxen, refusing to slow down until the wagon bursts beneath the first layer of trees. Shade swallows them instantly. Cool, damp air replaces the dry plains wind. The world darkens, not in a frightening way, but in a protective way, like stepping inside a deep breath. The river runs quietly nearby, half hidden between rocks and roots. The sound of water mixing with leaves rustling overhead creates a cover of natural noise, something the woman rider promised would help. The father pulls the wagon into the thickest part of the grove. Branches hang low, leaves overlap. Shadows form a tangled pattern on the ground. Perfect, confusing, safe, or as safe as anything here can be. He turns to the mother. "Help me hide the wheels." She nods, jumping down immediately. They pull branches, leaves, and brush to cover the wagon tracks. The oxen are led behind a cluster of fallen logs where the ground dips just enough to hide their silhouettes. The children remain silent, fear making them small and obedient. Their eyes watch everything. Their breaths barely rise. Once the wagon is as concealed as possible, the father crouches behind a thick trunk, rifle ready. Not raised, just held. Steady, quiet. The mother joins him. She doesn't carry a weapon, but her presence is a shield of its own. The father listens. At first, nothing, just birds, leaves, water. Then, faint, distant hoofbeats. They stop at the ridge. Pause. Wait. A voice carries on the wind, too far to understand but sharp, commanding. Another voice responds. Then silence. "They're deciding whether to follow us," the mother whispers. The father shakes his head slowly. "No, they're deciding whether they need to." Silence again. Too long, too calculating. Then, hoofbeats again. Multiple. Fast, but not toward the trees, north, away. The father doesn't exhale yet. He listens for more. He waits for the pattern to become clear. Then a single hoofbeat breaks away from the group. One rider staying behind, circling closer, scanning, searching. The father's pulse pounds. The rider moves along the edge of the cottonwoods, weaving between open patches of grass. His silhouette appears between trees. Tall hat, upright posture, horse snorting softly. He's looking for something, not aimlessly, not randomly, tracing the land, reading the ground, following instincts sharpened by years of doing exactly this. He circles once, twice. The mother's hand tightens on the father's arm. The father stays still. The rider approaches the place where the wagon entered the grove. He slows. His horse sniffs the ground. He examines the broken grass, the faint trail. The father's breath lodges in his chest. The rider shifts in the saddle, leans down, touches the earth with one gloved hand. He lifts a scout's tool, a thin stick used to check soil depth, and presses it into the ground. He studies the impression. He studies the trees. He studies the shadows. Minutes feel like hours. Then he straightens, his face unreadable. He turns the horse east, not toward the family, not toward the main group, but toward the river's direction, following a faint idea, a partial clue, a possibility. And then a sound from far off, a gunshot, not close, not targeted, but loud enough to grab every rider's attention on the plains. The rider jerks his head toward the sound, hesitates only a heartbeat, then kicks his horse into motion and disappears at full speed. The father finally breathes. "What was that?" the mother asks. He shakes his head. "Someone buying time," he whispers. They both know who. The woman rider. She made noise, deliberate, dangerous noise, to pull attention away from the wagon, to draw the hunters off their trail, to keep the family hidden. For now, the grove is safe, but safety in the West never stayed long. The father moves deeper into the trees, needing to be sure. He crouches behind another trunk, peering through the thick layers of leaves to the open plains beyond. Empty, quiet. But the kind of quiet that waits. The mother touches his shoulder gently. "We can't stay here forever," she murmurs. "I know," he says, "but we'll stay until the land tells us to move." He looks at his children, small, frightened, trusting. He looks at his wife, steady, strong, brave without trying. He looks at the trees, ancient, protective, whispering with wind. Night will come again soon, and with it answers and dangers and choices no frontier traveler wants to make. But for this moment, the family is hidden, breathing, alive. The land has given them shelter. But tomorrow, it may ask for something back. Let your breath soften into the stillness. The story is near its final turn. The night is waiting. The grove grows darker as evening drapes itself across the land. Not the rushing, dramatic darkness of a storm, but a slow, creeping dimness, like a heavy blanket settling over tired shoulders. The father listens to every shift of wind, every rustle of leaves, every faint stir of life. The mother holds the children close beneath the canvas, her breath steady, though her pulse beats fast. The oxen lie hidden in the hollow behind logs, their bodies warm, their eyes calm. Strange how animals often know more peace and danger than people do. Time passes the way it always does on the frontier, quietly, slowly, sharpened at the edges. Finally, when the sky is dark enough that the plains turn into a single endless silhouette, the father rises from behind the tree. He moves quietly to the wagon and whispers, "We should rest in shifts, no fires." The mother nods. She doesn't question. There's nothing to question anymore. They settle into their makeshift hideout. The children fall asleep quickly, exhaustion pulling them under, innocent to the danger sweeping miles beyond the grove. But the parents remain awake, listening to sounds that may or may not be real. A crack of twig, or the settling of bark, a distant hoofbeat, or thunder over faraway hills. The West makes mysteries out of whispers. Hours pass, and then another sound rises, soft, uneven, footsteps, human. The father tenses, gripping his rifle. The mother pulls the children deeper under the blankets. The father moves silently toward the edge of the grove, heart pounding hard enough he fears the sound might give them away. The footsteps grow closer, not fast, not precise, but dragging slightly, wounded. A branch shifts, a shadow appears, and then the figure steps into a sliver of moonlight. The father lowers his rifle with a gasp. It's her, the woman rider, barely holding herself up. One arm wrapped around her ribs, her coat torn even more than before. Her face pale with pain, streaked with dust and sweat. Her horse trails behind her, limping, shaking, exhausted. She stumbles once, catches herself on a low-hanging branch, and exhales a breath that sounds like surrender. The father rushes forward, placing a steadying hand beneath her arm. "What happened?" he whispers. She shakes her head, not refusing to answer, just too tired to shape words. The mother emerges, helping to ease the rider down onto a blanket near the wagon. The children wake briefly, eyes wide, but the mother's calming touch sends them back into sleep. The father kneels by the rider. "Did they find him?" he asks softly. She closes her eyes, not from fear, but from exhaustion, thick enough to drown in. "They came close," she whispers. "Too close. I had to mislead them." "The gunshot?" She nods faintly. "Bought you time. Bought him time." Her breath catches in her throat, but not enough. The father's jaw tightens. Who is he? He asks again. What did he take that made them chase him like this? The woman opens her eyes, and the look inside them is one he will never forget. A look made of fatigue, duty, and a secret she never wanted to carry. He took something that belonged to them, she whispers. Something they killed to protect. Something they buried for a reason. Her breath trembles. He thought he could outrun a past that isn't done with him. Her eyes drift toward the plains beyond the grove, silent, dark, endless. He thought freedom was just distance. The mother kneels beside her. Are the riders near? The woman shakes her head slowly. Not anymore. I led them south. They won't come this way tonight. A soft relief spreads through the grove, small, temporary, fragile. The father touches her shoulder gently. You saved us. The woman exhales a thin laugh. Maybe, or maybe I just delayed things. Time isn't the same out here. The father asks the question that's been burning inside him. What do we do now? The woman opens her eyes again. You leave at dawn? She whispers. You follow the river east till the land rises. There's a trading post there. Good people. Safe ground. And you? The mother asks softly. The woman rider gives the faintest hint of a smile. Tired, but real. I'll cross the plains. Someone out there needs warning more than you need company. She tries to stand, but her legs tremble and she sinks back down. You're hurt? The mother says. You can't ride tonight. I don't have to ride, she whispers. I just have to move. The father shakes his head. No, you stay. Rest. If danger comes, you'll hear us run. For a moment, silence fills the grove, not the suffocating silence of fear, the soft silence of understanding. The woman rider nods, not in defeat, but in gratitude. The family rests a little. The father keeps watch. The mother tends to the rider's wounds with gentle hands. Night passes. Dawn arrives quietly, spilling pale gold across the plains. The woman rider stands, barely but proudly. She tightens her belt, adjusts what's left of her coat, and retrieves her hat. The family prepares the wagon. Before parting, the woman looks at the father. You're good people, she says softly. Good people survive out here, not because they're strong, but because they listen. The father nods. And what should we listen to? He asks. She gestures toward the land stretching endless in every direction. To the quiet, she whispers. That's where danger speaks first. She mounts her tired horse, slowly, painfully, but with unwavering determination. The family watches as she rides into the morning light, a lone silhouette crossing the plains, becoming smaller, smaller, until the horizon swallows her whole. The father turns to his family. We move, he says gently. The oxen step forward. The wagon creaks. The trees release them back into the world, and the long, dusty road continues, the same as it always was, the same as it always will be. The plains don't remember names, but they remember footsteps. And they remember those who traveled with courage, even the quiet kind. The family moves east. The woman rides north. The 6 riders hunt south. And the frontier keeps its secrets for another day. Their story doesn't end with a gunfight, or a tragedy, or a miracle. It ends the way real frontier stories do, quietly, softly, with survival earned step by gentle step. Close your eyes, let the world fade, let the wind ease, let the plains stretch quiet again. The journey is done.